Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered, are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Lockdown Saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 366. Today, I'm joined by my buddy Jace Allen to talk about delivering an easy death and the nature of the beast. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. The close of the Pennsylvania gun season is upon us. So I guess the big push of the season is kind of over. If you're still holding a tag, there's still some good hunting out there to be had. In some instances, it gets maybe a little bit easier. Some instances, depending on what you have access to, can be a little tougher, especially if you don't have really good destination food. Not that it can't be done, but those destination food sources certainly make it a little easier. I'm going to actually plan to head out and actually not pull cameras, but probably check cameras. I really didn't check cameras this year. I think I checked them once up in the North Piece on one of the hunts that I did up there in October. So really, I don't know, what inventory might be around and how deer are using, different areas. And so it's really going to be kind of a nice, learning opportunity for me just to kind of see what we have on camera. I'm hoping to maybe get out next weekend, fingers crossed, to kind of do a camera pull. And I did place some cameras in some new areas. So kind of stoked to kind of see what's on that. Cause I've kind of shied away from checking them so much during the season. I don't check them a lot, but I would often kind of use them as, for intel, like in the moment. And I feel like that hadn't served me really well, and especially whenever I have a bunch of data on an area, and then I kind of know what's happening for like past 3 years or whatever, and I'd have a really good plan, and then I get a couple pieces of information in a given week, and then it kind of throws the plan that I kind of laid based on a mountain of evidence, if you will. And I feel like this year, the reason why it has been better than the past years was just because I focused on what I historically knew and not so much on, what I know kind of in that moment or the real time, information, if you will. But my season for the most part has been wrapped up for a little while. So I've just been doing a lot of e-scouting and kind of already, chomping at the bit and making plans for next year, on the North Piece, primarily on the North Piece in PA, and then kind of did a little e-scouting in some places in some plain states, that I'm kind of considering, and then also doing some e-scouting in Idaho. Because I actually, if December 1st was the deadline or was the lottery drawing, I don't know what you call it. I think it's a lottery is how they kind of refer to it. But for putting in to try to get your an Idaho tag if you're planning to hunt Idaho elk this year. And I did get a tag. So I'll be headed out there in September with my buddy Wilson. He's got an awesome spot where he had some really good encounters with bulls last year and has really kind of dialed this area of Idaho in. And I'm going to be actually hanging out with a good group of dudes. So it'll be Wilson, myself, our buddy Clancy. It's one of Wilson's good friends from where he lives in Idaho, and then a couple of the guys from North Idaho Archery. I think we're going to be hanging out with Jake Kremer. Had him on the show a couple weeks ago. We'll be hanging out with him as well. We're going to have a little camp. Got a killer spot that Wilson kind of, I won't say stumbled into. The dude works hard and finds areas, and so he's got a really good spot. He had some really good action this year, and so that's where we'll be headed. I think the only kind of thing we have to figure out right now is just really when I'm going to kind of land in country, if you will, because last time I went out, I guess 2 years ago, or not this past season, but the season prior, I probably got there a little early. Was out there for the opener of the archery elk And really that was, Wilson's birthday was that weekend. So I wanted to be out there to kind of do that, celebrate it in the mountains and stuff like that, but probably wasn't the best time to be out there for chasing bulls. And so I'm going to go a little later in September. Just don't know exactly, what the date is. But other than that, not a whole lot of news to report on the hunting front. The only other thing I did this past week was as I'm getting older, for all you dudes out there that might be, age might be creeping up on you. I started doing the ice baths or plunges. I've done something similar to that in the past, going from a sauna to like a cold shower type of thing and back and forth. I've done those in the past and had liked them, but I hadn't really taken the full on plunge, no pun intended, and have added that to the repertoire. And so far, so good. I dig it. I feel good after I do it. It seems to be helping with recovery from workouts or jiu-jitsu or whatever, even if you have hard hunts and you're sore or whatever the case is, or maybe you just, as we all do, start getting a little older. Things don't work quite the way you would like them to always. This just seems to be a nice way to kind of snap things back into shape. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump into today's show. Have a cool show for you guys today. Got my good buddy Jace Allen on. He's been on a couple times. You guys know him. You love him. He's one of the dudes as part of the group of guys that I kind of refer to as the Missouri 3 or the Missouri Killers that I have on. And Jace is just one of those dudes, man, that is a consummate woodsman. He's constantly learning and striving to be better in the deer woods. And just the one thing that always kind of struck me about him, early on when he and I met, was just his, insatiable kind of quest for whitetail knowledge, no matter where it comes from. And in some of the success that he's had, you maybe think that he would rest on his laurels a little bit, but he doesn't. And he's always kind of looking for ways to get better and extend into parts of the season that maybe haven't been as good for him as they've been in the past. He admittedly, has kind of mentioned, November has not been his best kind of time frame. He's probably a better early and late season hunter. And that's probably very opposite for a lot of you that are listening, right? And me included, where it's like, I always feel like the rut, that November time frame, just when they get a little bit more visible, I tend to have more success, typically speaking. And that's probably the case for a lot of guys. But Jace is kind of the opposite. And so, he's really been kind of diving into, sharpening his knives, if you will, for that November timeframe. And so at the time that we recorded this, he was getting ready to head to Illinois, and he still had his second Missouri tag to fill. We talk about the buck that he killed early in the earlier part of the season in Missouri, which, kind of really didn't go the way he wanted it to go. And we spent a lot of time talking about that and, and his how he feels his obligation to give these critters that we chase an easy death, and how things might have went sideways for him. And, ultimately he rebounded and found success, but it really wasn't the way that he wanted it to kind of end. And then he did, we talked a little bit about his plans for, later in the season, headed to Illinois, and then ultimately that second season for him in Missouri, and what his plans were for that. And just give you the quick update was that he filled both tags as I expected Jace would, as he's just a straight killer. So always love having Jace on. Killer conversation. I really dug it. I hope you guys dig it as much as I did. And as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. Today I got on my buddy. You're a multiple time offender now at this point, dude. I got my buddy, Mr. Jace Allen on tonight. What's going on, man?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just rolled into my hometown, getting ready for Thanksgiving here. Hoping to get a couple deer on the ground while I'm here on this Thanksgiving break. But I appreciate you having me on again.
Yeah, man, you're becoming a regular, dude. I always just like to talk to you, man. It's like we'll text every now and then. We were chatting last week, just like on the phone, and like it's just always fun chopping it up with you, talking deer hunting. But before we got started recording, we were talking about hunting with a traditional bow, and you were saying, because I was saying to you, I was like, we were talking about shoulder injuries and just injuries in general. And I was like, maybe I've been considering, picking up a traditional bow because maybe it'll be a little easier on my shoulder. Maybe I'll be able to shoot it more often. And I was like, it's something I'd really like to do is like use that and killing on the ground in open country with a traditional bow. And you were like, just be ready for some heartbreak, because you did it for like 5 seasons. And then you were kind of talking about like, what you went through and things like that, like as far as like missing deer, and you were like, goodness, like I cannot hit, anything, at this point. And so I'm just curious, man, like the fact that you hunted it with it for multiple years, like was missing those couple of deer, like really the reason to kind of hang it up? Because for me, it's like what I was saying before we jumped on here was like, I don't know, if you go somewhere like on a travel hunt somewhere, wherever it is, like Nebraska, wherever, right? Oklahoma, or a place like Kansas where you can't draw every year, would I be willing to let a good deer walk out of my life because it's not in range, and knowing that I can only be there 10 days once every 2 years or whatever, right? And so that's kind of the rub for me, but I'm curious kind of what you think.
Right, man, it's a hard decision to make. I think maybe not everybody gets to that point to where they, want to go after one with a recurve, at some point in their life. But, a lot of people do. And, I was no different into that. I grew up, I hunted with a compound, and, I had a lot of success, with that compound. I didn't really fail a whole lot. And, I was having good success with it. And all of a sudden I'm just like, you know what? I just, I want to pick up a recurve. And I'm like, this is going to be, this is going to be great. I go out and, this was like the first week. I mean, I just picked up a recurve. It's October the 5th. It's kind of cloudy. It's windy. It's got that late October feel to it. I have a grunt call in my hand. And I grunt in like this, 140-inch 8-pointer to 13 yards, and I sail an arrow right over his back. And I'm just like, well, now, I really have to, I really got to double down and make this happen. Well, it took me 3 years to just shoot to kill a deer, with a recurve. I mean, it's hard stuff, you go from, with a compound, I would say generally, anything from 40 yards and in, most people are probably going to be okay with. And then, you hop over to a recurve and you're talking about, 20 yards and in. I think it's a phenomenal learning curve, learning how to get, 20 yards away from deer. But as you said, you're going to have a lot of heartbreak, with that. And if you're fine with that, I would say, go for it. But for me, it kind of got to a point to where there was, 3 big bucks on public land that I feel like I should really, really have on my wall. And I didn't have them, on my wall after that last one. And it just kind of got to a point for me to where I felt like, I mean, I'll just say like the recurve was a little bit too hard for me. Mm-hmm. In all honesty, it's not, you have to work harder to get your shot. And then whenever you actually get your shot, then you got to make it,
right. Right. Yeah.
And, it was this big, long, 5-year-long journey of, learning that and, learning a lot of valuable lessons, from hunting with a recurve. But, I picked up the compound because I just wanted to see a little higher level of success, but I wouldn't take it back. That's for sure.
Right.
I'm curious.
Right. Like, do you think it made you sharper as a bow hunter, the seasons that you used the recurve? Yeah.
For sure. Because actually, I was at one of those Iowa road shows, and there was a guy that asked a question. He was like, how do you know how to get to like the right 20 yards? Like how to get to the right spot? It's like, you have this 100-yard swath, that, deer come through. It's like, how do you, pick the trail or whatever? It's kind of how his question went. And I never did catch up to him, but I thought I had a pretty decent answer. If you have a weapon that, let's say, let's say you have a gun in your hands, you can sit probably anywhere in there and you can, kill whatever deer comes through there. But if you're limited to a weapon which you can only shoot to 20 yards, then you have to on purposely try to get that deer into 20 yards. So what's that going to do for you? What's going to happen is you're going to have to probably, go in there, scout that, and then, see where exactly those deer are coming through at. And then you're going to have to set up on purpose, for that deer to come through, 20 yards or less. And I'm not going to say you're going to be, right all the time. A lot of the times you're going to be wrong, but then you get to learn it, and then you can be like, sorry if I'm getting long-winded on this one. I don't know if I already kind of made my point, but basically, if you can learn how to get purposely within 20 yards or less of deer, that is going to teach you a lot. Whenever you have to be that specific with that stuff. And there's also like a fear thing that goes into it too. It's like, I don't want to set up, this close to, trails, or, that's too close and whatnot. And so you have to battle, with that a little bit, and eventually you will get over it, and you will start to really, really develop, how to get, really, really close to these things, and how to be specific on your sign and your setups and whatnot. And, for those reasons, hunting with a recurve, I won't take that back.
All right, folks, we're back. Sorry, we had some technical difficulty here. Technology not being kind to us this evening. But what we were talking about was just the using a trad bow and it tightening up like your skills, and me thinking that it'd be nice if I could learn those lessons without having to use a trad bow. But human nature probably suggests that I'll probably just default to whatever advantages that I have, right? Especially if there's a good deer that's involved. It's like I'm probably not going to purposefully screw myself, whenever I don't have to. So I don't know, man. We'll see. I'm probably not going to jump right into it now. I've been looking at a traditional bow recently and kind of like perusing the options and stuff like that. I got a couple buddies who have been getting on me for like the past year or so. Like, hey man, when you going to make the switch? My one buddy actually has a bow, and he's like, hey, I got a bow for you. He actually even bought like the arrow tuning kit last year and was like, I got a kit. Like, we'll make you arrows. I got a bow you can have. Like,
dang.
You just tell me when you want to come over, And so he's hell bent on getting a traditional bow in my hands. So, I might have to take him up on it. But with that, man, you've it's like if someone's willing to do me that solid. And the other thing is too is like it's completely new for me. Like, I don't know I have two recurves at the house that I shoot once in a while that my dad gave me. And they're not, I don't have an arrow tune for them. I just go out and fling arrows in the backyard for fun.
Right.
So I do, but I don't know the first thing about them. Like, I shoot them. I basically shoot them like I'm throwing a baseball. That's how I aim. Like, I don't really aim. I just look at the spot I want to hit. I pull it back and I let it rip. That's how my dad taught me how to shoot it. So I don't know. Is that how you shot, or how did you shoot?
So I shot that way, which is, an instinctive form of shooting. There's quite a few ways to shoot a recurve. I just went for the instinctive one. I tell you what, about the hardest lesson that I had whenever I was shooting that way is whenever I started shooting a recurve, I was shooting a 500 grain arrow, and I was shooting everything like right at the top of their back or high. And then like the next year, or actually a couple years later, I went to, it was like a 620 grain arrow or something. And the two deer that I actually killed with a recurve, I killed with that arrow. And I hit them, perfect, just torched them. And all of a sudden I started getting to this heavy arrow stuff, and I ended up with an 818 grain arrow, and I started, shooting everything low. So what I found out with my, instinctive journey is that there's like a certain trajectory, just like you're throwing a baseball, there's a certain trajectory that, your brain has in mind, or at least in my mind anyways. And I actually had to find an arrow weight that matched that. But it's like, unless I shot at deer, it's hard for me to recreate that on a range. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I get what you're saying. Like, you have where you think it should land, and like if the things don't match up for you, it's like it's a no-go.
Right. Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
some people like they shoot point on or string walking and whatnot. I guess that's ways to get away from that. But just for, I guess, my style of shooting a recurve, it took me a long time to actually find what matched me in that
Right.
regard.
And I've had my buddy on from the push. You know, those guys are all traditional. You know, and he kind of
Well,
explained to me like the different. And some of the stuff just seemed like I was like, man, it seems like a lot of math, a lot of
yeah.
figuring. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, I don't know that I could. I'm sure once you do it enough, it just becomes second nature. But I was like, I don't know that I would get it like quickly enough. You know?
Right. Well, Three Rivers
and
Archery. Sorry. I was going to
No, go
say,
ahead.
threeriversarchery.com, they have a arrow spine calculator. Play around with it and you'll understand like arrow spines and, something about the archer's paradox. It makes life really simple whenever it comes to all that math stuff as far as matching up your bow to an arrow. That's actually going to be the correct spine.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Anyway, we didn't jump on here to talk about traditional archery necessarily. It was just what you and I started talking about before we even started recording. And I'm always kind of fascinated with guys that have used traditional equipment in the past, to pick their brain a little bit because it's something I've been kind of like kicking around. But what we're going to talk about now is just basically what you've been having going, what's been going on with Jace since like basically September, right? Mm-hmm. And I always enjoy following along with you, man, because just gonna be honest, man, like I always kind of refer to you in Austin and Hunter as like the Missouri 3. Like,
Yeah.
like because you guys are just like straight killers. I'm always like, I got a couple buddies in Missouri that are just like straight killers, man. I was like, you want deer killed, these guys can do it. I was like, like that's just kind of how I refer to you guys, man. And it's interesting too, because you guys are all like, you're younger than me, and I say younger. You got you're men, you're adults, but like you're younger than me, like so younger fellas that are just like that get hunting mature deer like almost beyond your years. You know what I mean? Whoa. And you're all just like so good at it. And you both have very similar things that you do, but you're all very different in ways. Because I've had a chance to kind of talk to all you guys.
Right.
And little known things, like I actually was just talking about my hunts for next year, and I think Missouri is on the list for next year. I think that's where I'm going to head. So I'm going to be coming to your neck of the woods, just as a heads up. I think I'm like 85% sure, but I always enjoy having you guys on, and you always have all you guys always have interesting hunts. Like it's never a dull hunt. With you guys, you know what I mean? Like it's always something kind of gets wild, and like you've kind of had that season already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's what you've been kind of living, right? And so we'll get to your deer, but the first thing I want to get to first is like you do a really good job of finding your target deer and like outlining what deer you're going to be, and we'll get into like how things kind of played out. So when you're going into this year, and I'm just kind of talking about Missouri here. And you're looking for the deer you're gonna hunt this year. Like, how are you doing that this year? Because we talked about Kentucky and stuff last year, and how you went about it. You did a ton of glassing, kind of found it, and all that stuff. How did you go about finding this deer? Or your target list, if you will, for this year.
I did a little experimenting this year for early season. I did not do any summer scouting at all this year. I wanted to see how long it took me if I just started September the 15th. So the 2 deer that I end up getting on for actually 3 deer that I end up getting on for early season, I had no clue that these deer existed until I actually started hunting. Actually, I'll take that back. The day before season, so September the 14th, that was the only evening that I went out and scouted. I did this for a couple reasons. I've been bad to in the past get locked on a deer in like July or like June. Like I'll see like this one deer, I think it's going to be huge. And then like I try to watch it all throughout June and all throughout July. And then, sometimes they can change in that later July, coming into August time frame. And then I'm so, hung up on one deer. It's like I kind of feel like I go a little bit blind to what's going on around me a little bit. And so I wanted to take a little more opportunistic approach to this season and kind of replicate what I did in Kentucky, which is just kind of go into, my hunt with an open mind. Don't have any preconceived notions, and, pretty much since the opener, find and, get on these deer and hunt them. And so and like I said, it's been different here from the last couple of years. So I didn't have, a target buck, starting out, September 15th. I can definitely tell you that this is going to sound crazy, but there's definitely benefits to having a game plan going in September 15th. Because it took me a little while.
Right.
My buddy Charles Golson, he shot a really big buck like opening day, like right into first light. And he went through a whole ton of planning and scouting and, did all of his homework. And he was right on top of that deer, opening morning, and he killed it. And it's just like, whenever I started, I'm just like, a little bit, remind myself, it's like, okay, that's why we do that. I don't know why, but sometimes I kind of have to remember or like remind myself of the whys I do things. And it's just kind of become a complicated thing to me for where I try to simplify it. And then, like I said, I get reminded, why we do those sorts of things. So that's how I started out. I know it's probably not the answer you were expecting, but that's how we started this year.
Right. No, that makes sense, man. And I like that. That's what I always kind of appreciate about you, man. Like that's from the first time you and I kind of met and spoke, you have like the deer at the end of the rainbow is just like, is the intended consequence, but it's just like the natural thing that might happen because of what you're doing. But like the thing that I always kind of dug about your approach was that like you're willing to change things up and manipulate things to learn. Like, and that's the part to me that I always found really cool about how you do things is like, you don't necessarily find one way to do things and then I'm just going to rinse, repeat because I was good at this one thing. Like you're willing to kind of move away from like the ways you found success before to try to find other ways to find success and just be a better hunter overall. Even if that means you're going to have some hardships, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that that's super cool, man, because I think it just puts you in a situation to where you see, it's like a quarterback seeing a lot of defense, right? Like if you only ever see one defense, how are you ever going to play well against like, a zone defense if all you ever played against was a man defense, right? And the only way you get good at it is if you put yourself in that position to see it, right? And so you purposefully put yourself in positions of almost disadvantage to have to work out of, which I think is just, I mean, it's awesome because it makes you better at your game at what you do. When you have all your faculties, it makes you that much more dangerous.
Well, I'm telling you what, I learned a lot this season, and there's a couple podcasts that I listened to before season, and this kind of ties in together even until now. But like I would say, just summing all that up, my whole early season, the one thing that I learned about whitetails, and this was something that Troy Pottinger said. He said that deer are daylight sensitive. And man, going into the season, I'm thinking, I know of all these, these different spots where bucks are going to be. And, I know where some are, and I don't know like others are, like why they bed there and whatnot. But anyways, I get into the chase for my, the first deer I chase after come season.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw him Friday night before the opener, and I'm going. Well, I guess I'll just preface this all with I know all of this land that I'm hunting because I've scouted in the spring. I know all this stuff like up, down, left, and right, like the back of my hand. So
Right.
I'll just preface it with that. So this isn't like unfamiliar ground for me.
You're not going in
But
completely blind. You have some
right,
intel of like the actual property, not necessarily the deer.
correct. And it's just
Yeah.
like these deer are here, but it's just like I knew this before season. I'm like, I'm missing something. I was like, I don't know what it is that I'm missing. And so I started my hunt for this first deer, and it was somewhere between 100 and probably a little above 140-inch 8-pointer. Really framing deer. I like the look of them. But I started hunting for this deer in this tree patch, and let's see. It was like, I think it was like the second morning I set up in there, and I can hear something over in this grass patch over to my left, and I can hear there's a deer in there, and it's breaking twigs, and I can hear, like, I thought like antlers hitting, like, brush and whatnot. And I'm looking at, this spot versus all the other spots that he could possibly bed, that has like, grass or like CRP type stuff around it. And he picked this one patch. I'm just like, I wonder like why he did that. Well, I found out after hunting this. So I got 3 hunts in on this deer before the gig was up. The 3 times that I set up on this deer, I was right. I set up my tree stand. I was like right at 50 yards away from this deer. He was, in his bed. And one evening, finally, he got me, and the gig was up. He knew that deer knew he was being hunted at that point, and so any chance of me like getting that deer like less than shooting him right out of his bed was probably going to be a no-go at that point. And I figured he would move, and he did. I actually found him later, but I'll get to that. So I'm like, okay, time to go find a new deer. And I'm wondering, like, why is he, bedding in this certain patch? And I'm like, okay, whatever, move along to the next one. So I go on this observation sit, and I'm overlooking this other grass patch, and it's the same kind of grass as where I just came from. And I end up seeing, the biggest deer I went after early season came out of this grass patch, and it's going through my head, deer are daylight sensitive, a little bit in the back of my mind. And I'm like, why are these deer bedding in this, this certain kind of grass? And I start thinking about my hunts, that I had in Kentucky with those deer bedding in soybeans. And then it hit me that the kind of grass or the kind of CRP these deer are laying in, it gives them shade. Because the grass that they're kind of laying in, it's bladed grass, and it's fairly thick. So it gives them, the blades are rather thick, so it gives them a lot of shade. And then all of a sudden, whenever that hit me, and I remember Troy Ponder saying, deer are daylight sensitive, because I know this property like the back of my hand. All of a sudden, like all these new places just popped up in my mind for where I could, go potentially find a deer, because, of that thing that, Troy said, deer are daylight sensitive. All of a sudden, I know what kind of CRP to go look in, for other deer. It's a pattern that's that's repeatable. And, it also gives me something, to cross off the list. Like if there's a certain CRP patch and that's not the right kind, or it doesn't provide shade, that's not going to be, the kind that, I'm looking for, especially whenever it's like 90 degrees out. These deer are looking for, really cool places. I started noticing the same thing other places, like in some more wooded environments that I was hunting. I heard Joe Elsinger, he was talking about, deer having like hot weather beds, versus, cooler weather beds. And I think it all still had to do with shade. So at that point, it like really like opened up my eyes to, why these deer are bedding where they bed. Not just that they bed there and that's the end of the story. Now I have the why behind it. And like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm seeking. That's what I'm looking for. That's the kind of information that I can take with me to other states and, replicate the same thing.
Right. Like, do you feel like, if you wouldn't have taken that approach this year of, just kind of starting from the beginning of the season as opposed to finding a deer in the summer, do you feel like you would have came to the same conclusion, or do you think that you wouldn't have seen that, or you wouldn't have recognized that pattern?
I don't think I would have recognized that pattern because, like at that point, I'm just worried about where that deer is and what he's doing, and the whys kind of go out the window because I don't really think about like, those whys whenever I'm like, they're hunting that deer at that point. It's all about, like him exactly where he's at, and then, what I guess what he's doing, and, without the whys associated with it.
Right. And that why is what will ultimately let you kill other deer at this point now, right? It's like getting and that's crazy.
Right.
Like just that, like understanding the type of grass they want to be in. Like that's pretty granular. You know what I mean? Like most people would just kind of probably stop at
CRP.
They're seeking shade.
Right.
Yeah, CRP, or they're seeking shade, right? Like not paying attention necessarily to like the grass type, and then going, oh, where does this grass live in other areas on this piece? You know what I mean? Like they're probably there too, right? Like that's a level of detail that just like unlocks the early season mystery in a lot of ways,
right?
At least on that piece, you could presume.
Well, I tell you what happened also is, the pieces that are around me, there's a lot of other properties that I've gone to, and I've done these same things to. I've scouted them, in the springtime, front, all over, and then all of a sudden, whenever I realized that, and then deer seeking shade and that kind of CRP, all of a sudden, I started thinking of other pieces of public that I've been to with similar CRP patches. And, I went back to them, and those are the places that I've been missing all those freaking years. And I'm just like, it's right here in front of my face. How have I been missing this whole time?
Yeah.
And so it was just like, another, level of understanding. But, so that was probably one of the coolest things, and, one of the most helpful things that I learned. Just from, taking that approach, on this season. But this deer, this bigger deer I started hunting, I started hunting him, and I had him down to probably roughly 3 or 4 acres where he spent like all of his time. And it was the biggest, thickest, nastiest, most shady, CRP patch you could ever imagine. I mean, like the stuff
what
was
time
like,
of year? What time of year was this?
So this was roughly September the 20th.
Okay.
Through the 25th, somewhere in there. And So I start hunting this deer, and I'm basically like at that point I considered it my job to hunt this deer as aggressively as I can without ever letting him know that I'm hunting him is the approach that I took on this deer. And it was actually kind of easy to do here. Every time that I set up in a tree for this deer, which is probably, well, I mean, it was pretty much every day, call it from September the 20th through October the 6th, whenever I end up shooting this other one. So I was in there a lot of days hunting. I started hunting them, and on this one side that worked with the winds that I was having, and like I said, I was setting up within 100 yards of him every time. He just was not coming out of this patch, especially later on whenever he figured out that he was being hunted, and there was other pressure in this area too. There was one evening where I snuck around the backside of this thing. After the wind had changed, it was like south, forever. And then, we got it north, or maybe it was the other way around or something, but it allowed me to go to the backside of this. And man, I'm telling you what, this was really my opportunity at this deer, because I found where he was coming out of this patch and making a long, wide circle around to get over to this bean field. And I followed these trails and these tracks and these rubs, a couple rubs that he was leaving all the way back. And I'm looking, and there's like the main patch, and there's like a little side patch like off to the side. And I'm thinking like, man, I'm already back in here. Like, this is going to be my opportunity today. Like, whenever he leaves this tonight, he's going to go this way, and he's going to smell me. And he's going to know that, I'm hunting him at that point. So I was like, this is it right here. And I'm like, do I set up in this tree? I was like, or do I set up in that one like 30 yards ahead? I was like, I'm going to go 30 yards ahead and set up in that tree. And I walk about 15 yards. I'm walking on top of this log so I don't make any noise. And all of a sudden, like 15 yards away from me in this little side patch, this freaking buck stands up, and it's just an eruption of grass, antlers, and, brush. His antlers hitting off brush and breaking shit. And I'm just like, oh boy, that was really my opportunity at this one. And so I go ahead and I hunt that, and I hunt it the next morning. And while all this is going on, I'm driving in and out of this public land every single day, and I'm seeing where pressure is and where pressure isn't. And there's this one place that usually there's like 2 or 3 guys like always hunting this, and for the first week nobody had hunted it. And I'm like, that's odd. I was like, okay, whatever. And I'm in battle with this other deer, and like for another week, and there's still nobody hunting that. And I'm just like, I'm, like I said, still actively hunting this other deer, but like there was an evening where I had the wrong wind to hunt that one in the way that I wanted to hunt him at that point, because I didn't blow him out of that patch. But I definitely made things a lot harder by not making the most of that opportunity. So I'm, watching this place. There's nobody hunting it. Finally, I'm just like, you know what? If nobody else is going to hunt this, I'm going to. So the first night I go in there. Again, this is, a spot that I've been through, and I'm like, if there's a mature buck in here, he's going to be in, this kind of CRP, what I just learned like a week earlier. So I knew like how aggressive I could be with it, with that. And, those deer still not get my wind, because I felt like I had a really good idea that's where, if there was a deer in there, that's where he was going to bed. And I was right. that evening, there's like a 125-inch 8-pointer that came out and slid by me at 56, and this other deer that looked pretty good, plenty good to me, stepped out also, and he went up and he started. He actually came out of his bedding, passed by me, and went to a bean field that I didn't have access to, and he started feeding out there, and I'm like, it was like a northwest wind that day, and I was like, the next time, I get a northwest wind, I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna try to hunt them. And a couple of days goes by. I'm hunting this other deer, and I'm not seeing it. I'm starting to lose confidence. That deer has moved on. That I put too much pressure on him. During that time, I had a couple decent 3-year-olds come through. And we get an east wind, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go try out this other buck again. Except I'm just gonna sit back a little bit. I'm gonna see if they use that same bedding, and then I'll let him do his thing. I'm just gonna stay back to where I'm not noticed. I'll just let him do his thing, see if he does relatively the same thing. If so, then I might not assume this bedding is wind based. Well, I should have. Because on that east wind, he came out, used the same trail, and I was like, all right, if he's going to keep on doing that, then I think the next day I had a south wind, which if he was leaving his bedding area, he would have to be walking, wind to tail. And I was like,
right.
Usually mature bucks, they don't, usually screw up like that. But I was like, but, these deer at this point, they're still unpressured. So they don't know they're being hunted yet, and I'm just like, maybe it works. And I go hunting on a south, and I don't see anything. I'm like, okay, that was a terrible idea. Like back to the original plan. I'm gonna wait on my northwest wind, and I'm gonna get in there. And I had to wait 6 days on the next time I had a northwest wind, it's really, really hard to do on public land to wait that long to go hunt a spot, because it's such an obvious spot. There's, quite a few people out early season. Somebody could go in there, blow it up, and then I wouldn't have a chance, but that's not something I can control. And right. So I just, I can only control what I can. So in that time frame, I'm still hunting this other deer. I hunted one evening. I'm pretty sure that I saw that big one I was chasing. And but I was kind of unsure, and then I didn't see him throughout that whole next couple of days. I'm like, man, I just don't know if this deer's in here at this point. And this is kind of unlike me, but I'm just like, man, I gotta know if this thing's in here. And so I've done something that I haven't done before. My buddy Charles, he's really good at wind bumping stuff. And so this is what we decided to do. I was like, just so I know that, this deer isn't in here anymore, I'm going to set up where I saw that, deer coming out, and, he's going to wind bump it. We're going to see what happens. You can already see where this is going wrong. My buddy, he starts wind bumping this patch, and I have quite a few deer come out, and they come out, on this trail next to me, and I should have moved closer to the trail, except for some reason I didn't, and all of a sudden, he's wind bumping it, and I hear just, it sounded like a bulldozer going through this brush, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And this deer comes out on the same trail, all these other deer coming out, and I shoot, and honestly, I have no idea where that arrow went, but I was just in absolute panic because this deer stepped out, and this is it's one of my dream bucks. I knew that the first time I saw him. I was like, this is a special, this is a special deer. I really, really wanted him. And I kind of let that get to me a little bit. So anyways, I fire a shot and I have no idea where that arrow went, but I missed him. And at that point, with my buddy, going through that area and actually walking through that bedding area, I knew that he wasn't coming back. Right. He's not going to leave this entire area, permanently, but he's going to move. And so I'm kind of sitting there, I'm licking my wounds over that one. And it's like, 3:00 in the evening. And I'm like, it's a northwest wind. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go hunt my other deer. And so I leave there and I'm just like, why did I even shoot? And I was like, I don't even know. I was just like so upset over that.
Right. You're going through like all the things we think about when we make a really bad mistake and you're like, what am I doing? It's
right.
Like,
I'm just like, that's not like me. I've always tried to practice really good, shot selection. And, I'm thinking about these things as I'm, getting all my gear in, to go in on, this next hunt. And I get set up in a tree and it was a cold front, northwest wind. And I'm sitting there in my tree and it's, roughly, 40 minutes before dark, 45 minutes before dark. I hadn't been sitting there too long. And all of a sudden I look over and in this CRP patch, my number 2 buck, he stands up and I'm like, well, here we go. And I'm sitting there in my tree and I'm watching this deer. He's making a rub like super aggressively. And I noticed something else too, is that he was by himself at that point. So like he had like in that area, like he was the most mature deer. He was the most aggressive. He was the top dog in there and he knew it too. And I could tell just by, his demeanor, and, how he was like rubbing this tree. I mean, just really, really getting after it. To the point where I considered there was almost twice that I got out of my tree and, went over and tried to put a stalk on him because the deer was at 60 yards. But I was like, man, if I get down, I'm going to really be at a disadvantage here. But I knew he wasn't going to come my way. I knew he was going to go north, towards this bean field. I'm just like, I got to do something. I was like, I got to get that deer over here. And I looked earlier, around my tree stand just for a calling situation. And if there's a deer, out that way, and if they're looking back my way, they're not able to see if there's actually a deer standing underneath my tree or not, because there was, some more cover, in around where I was. So if he wanted to come, take a look, I knew he'd have to get close. And this was the first time I've ever done this, but I'm like, you know what? It's a really good time to try out a snort wheeze. I've never tried it out before, but it just seems like the right time.
So no time like the present, right?
no time like the present. And so I snort wheeze at this deer. And so this deer is like directly west of me. And I snort wheeze and he looks he like snaps his head like back over in my direction. He's like, did I just, hear what I thought I heard? And all of a sudden he snaps his head back forward and he disappears and he goes north. I'm like, okay, well maybe he was just like not interested. Like he's going to go up to this bean field and start feeding. And I'm looking over there. And I don't know how the hell this deer snuck around me and got on the other side of me. But all of a sudden, I heard something to the east of me. And I looked, and this deer is like kind of like halfway trotting in. And he's like 30 yards away or like 25. And I'm just like, holy crap. And so I grab my bow real quick. And I stand up and I get a really good look at the deer at this point. I'm like, damn, he's actually bigger than I thought. And I range down the trail that he was walking down. and he was at, and the trail he was walking at, it was like right at 38 yards. And I click 38 on that trail, and I'm looking down to clip onto my D loop, and all of a sudden he's standing there in my one shooting lane that way. He's standing there looking broadside, and I draw my bow back, and I get my pin close to him, and he starts moving again away from me. So he starts turning to the left a little bit more. And I, let out a big, mat, and he stops, and he like kind of looks back, and I'm like, man, that's a really hard quartered away shot. But I was like, but I think I can make that. And I start to pull through, my release. And just as I'm doing that, like he's moving at that point. And I'll be honest, there was a little voice in my brain that said, he's too far quarter away now, don't shoot. But it was like right at that split second, I also shot. And
right.
The arrow looked good up and down, but I thought it was definitely farther forward than when I wanted it. And this arrow made a huge smack. And this deer takes 3 stumbling steps and falls over on its side. The deer gets back up, goes through some more brush, falls over on its side again, gets back up, does the same thing, falls over, finally gets up and then takes off. And I'm like, that is not good. If a deer runs a certain ways and then falls over, that's good. But if they're, doing that and then they get up and take off, with that smack that I heard, I'm like, that's not good. And
what was with that initial shot, what was your initial thought that you hit, just by the sound of it?
I thought best case scenario was that I got close to that shoulder bone and it stuck up into the ribs, but I thought best case scenario one lung, because he was quartered away and I was forward. Right. So we hop on the trail the next morning, and he's not dead, and his first 5 beds, and then all of a sudden this deer, he the next place we take the blood trail, he goes 800 yards across this wide open field, to the next piece of cover, and which is private, and I got to get permission to go look over there. I look over there, nothing. The next day I'm out. At this point, I'm not sure if this deer is dead or alive. I got people telling me, that deer is alive. He'll be fine. You should go, start hunting another deer. And I'm just like, I don't know. I'm gonna do everything I can, for this thing here. And the next day, so 2 days after the shot, I'm looking for buzzards, and I'm not seeing anything. No sign of the deer. At that point, after that day, I had checked absolutely everything that I had access to, which was everywhere where I think the deer, could have gone, or at least most of it. And a day, the next day comes around, and I drive out there, and I don't see any buzzards or anything. I'm just like, I guess this deer is still alive. Well, you just had this podcast with Austin over the wide one, and meanwhile he shot the wide one, and so I'm helping him track this deer. And then there was a new guy that was coming in to hunt. He pulled up right at the time that I get a text message. So this was 4 days after the shot. I get a text message that there's been a dead buck found in that general vicinity. And I go over there, and this new guy that just rolled in, I'm like, this might be my deer that's dead over here. And then the new guy was like, oh yeah, is that where I saw all those buzzards driving in this morning? And I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me.
Jeez.
And so I go over there, and sure enough, it's him. Definitely was not a good feeling because that deer just simply died from exposure. I just basically smashed his elbow and like right the pocket of that elbow right there, and essentially I had basically like completely taken his leg off. I didn't get to do any sort of autopsy to see if that broadhead made it up into the chest cavity at all. But that deer either just died from exposure, died from dehydration or starvation or something.
Right.
But it was like it was really slow and painful for him.
Yeah, I know.
I don't like that.
In talking, yeah, I know. In talking to you, like whatever it was last week, and then reading your post, like I knew it had to. Like you had mentioned specifically in the post that like it wasn't the way you wanted it to go down.
No.
And that's like the one thing I always appreciate about you, man. Is like you have a like there's a moral compass that you have that you actually care about the animal. Like there's plenty of hunters that are just like kill at any cost, right? Like and we've all met those guys, and look, it's like whatever floats your boat, right? I don't necessarily get down like that. And so I was feeling for you, man, because like, most people will be elated that like, hey, I got my buck, right? And so there's a part of you that's like, yeah, I filled my tag, like, he's dead, I found him. Like that's part of the battle is finding him, right? It's like you just want to find him, to put to just for like get closure on it, right? But there's also like a point, like whenever you're an ethical hunter, and you care about the animal and the resource. Like there is a certain way you want to do it,
Right.
And so I just got a lot of respect for you and how much time you spend like looking, because a lot of people would have cut bait 12 hours into that and been like, I'm going to go to my next deer. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I absolutely, hated that. I take a lot of pride, care for, at least I try to take a lot of pride and care for these deer. I've been doing a terrible job of it this year. After, making that first bad decision, others have, led after that. And I've kind of always been a firm believer, there's just a lot of ways that a deer can die out in the wild, and none of them are good. If I can give a deer a quick, fearless death, that's about the best that's the best that they're going to experience. So if I can kill a deer, very quickly, and they don't know they're being hunted, so they were never scared, that's as good as it gets for me, personally.
Right.
And that did not happen. So
yeah. No, I know what you're saying, man. Like the there's a little part of me from the hunt in Kansas where the first shot I made was fatal, right? Like, and I found that out after like we did the pulled the cape off and like did the autopsy and stuff like that. Was able to see like what the arrow did and what the first arrow. Right. But anyone who listened to the story, I know you and I talked on the phone and I kind of gave you the breakdown, how everything went down and how I had to kind of like walk him down and I put one more in him. Right. Like, even though I was trying to get that deer killed. Right. There was a part of me that was dying, like while I was trying to kill him, because like he knew I was trying to kill him. You know what I mean? Like, he knew that I was, like, he didn't know the difference between me being a coyote or whatever. He just knows that the thing that's behind me that I can smell that's walking toward me is going to try to kill me. Right. And that ate at me a little bit. Not going to lie. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it certainly did. So I totally understand the feeling, man. And like the way you said it, like to give them a quick, fearless, like the point being, like the word that stood out to me was fearless death. Right. And I wasn't able to do that either. And I hate that, Yeah. So I don't know, call me soft or call me whatever anyone wants to call me, man. But,
Right.
that's just how I feel.
Yeah. And I mean, I might have got kind of nasty towards some of my friends. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I can't really remember. But after I was, standing there looking over that deer, somebody had mentioned it. They're like, well, you better go, get your bow and your stand, and we'll take pictures of them. I was like, that is the last thing that we're doing here, is going to take a bunch of freaking beauty pictures of this thing,
right?
For advertising or something. It just, it was not the right time for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So some people, man,
sorry.
When you look back, no, that's okay. When you look back on it now, though, right? Like, because like I said earlier, like that's the one thing that I, reasons why I enjoy talking to you is because like you're very reflective, right? Like that's the one thing that like I totally dig about the conversations we always have. Like they're very thoughtful, and you spend time thinking about how things, not just like the hunt and like how you're gonna like pursue a deer and where it might live and find the type of grass it wants to live in. You know what I mean?
Right,
like that granular, right? Like it goes beyond that for you. Like you think back on the hunt, and you reflect on decisions you made, outcomes, how they could have been different, like what you could have done differently, how you could have been better, how do I be better the next time? Like, and I just think that that's like so important, not just for growth as a hunter, but it shows that you really care about what you're doing.
Right.
And so I'm just curious for you, like when you think back on it now, or the times that you have since the hunt, like what are the things that you'll take from this like forward as like either learned lessons or, things you might need to do differently the next time, or that like, I know for me, there's been certain things where I'm like, man, I will never do that again. Like whatever I do, it won't be that, So I'm just curious, like what it is for you. Like when you think about it, like, and try to take a positive out of it. I mean, the positive is yes, you filled your tag, but like more of like a moral or ethical or whatever positive out of it.
Right. I mean, it's going to be, I don't know why it's like now I'm going back to lessons that I learned in the beginning of my hunting career that are coming back to visit me. But, very specific shot selection is one thing that has made me, very successful. And for some reason this year, whether it be, pressure, external pressure or whatever that is, for some reason I've lost some of that touch and I've gained a little bit of greed. In my shooting, and that can lead to a lot of things. That can lead to something like target panic. If all you're thinking is going through your head is I have to shoot before this deer gets away, or it's going to get away, I have to shoot now. Those aren't ever things that made me successful in the past. And it's turned into, some bad decision making, and, just taking shots that, I shouldn't take. In the past, I let the deer, cut its own throat. If I don't get a really good shot on that animal, then, generally, I don't take it. Sometimes I push them, and honestly, it's worked out okay for me, a lot of the times. But for some reason this year I've been pushing a lot of stuff and it has not turned out well. So, that's something that I'm going to have to, keep in mind moving forward is, I've seen it happen to people before where, they have a couple misses and then all of a sudden, they have, those misses turn into more misses and more, bad decisions, and they just kind of get into this, some people call it a slump, with shooting deer. And there's not going to be, a slump, happen to me. I'm, like essentially, the slump is like up to me, whether it happens, or not. It's not just like this thing that, just happens. It's your decisions that you make, the plans that you have. something as simple as, practicing, good shot selection. You know what? Maybe I don't end up with that deer, maybe I do, but, I would have avoided, that deer, just, basically, suffering for 4 days, and that would have made me feel a lot better. So, those are the things to, look forward to, going into next year. And I mean, the remainder of this season also, because, we got a lot of season left here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the, I know you take it hard, man, but like, I would say, you do a great job otherwise, like it's okay to give yourself a little grace,
Right.
like 9 times out of 10, it's like you're doing the right thing, and it happens to all of us. And then in the moment, none of us want to hear that. It's like I hit one in Missouri a couple years ago and lost it, and had plenty of people say to me, hey man, that's bow hunting. And I get it. Like, it wasn't the first time it ever happened. Actually, that was the first time I ever lost a buck. Like, wasn't the first deer I had lost, but it was the first time I had lost the buck. And, and they say, it happens to everybody. Right. And I get it, but like at the same time, like, that's not something you want to hear in the moment. You know what I mean? You're like, no, like I get it, but like, no, like it doesn't make me feel any better right now to know that it's happened to other people. Like,
yeah. I mean, exactly what you said. Sure, it happens to other people, but at the end of the day, it's something that was within my control, that and therefore that could have been avoided. Whether it's just the nature of the beast or not.
Right. Yeah. Oh, nature of the beast. That was good. I like how you turned that phrase there.
Like that.
Did you do that on purpose, or did it just happen?
It just kind of happened a little bit on purpose. You gotta plug yourself every once in a while, I guess.
You gotta do it. Yeah. I love it, man. So you have a lot of season left, man. Like, so what's your plan now, dude? Like, I know you and I had talked a little bit about it. I know you're like in the midst of gun season. You had some Western stuff that, when I say Western, like kind of crazy stuff that happened, but what's your plan for the rest of the year?
So for the rest of the year, actually I have some good days coming up here. So tomorrow's Thanksgiving, then we have Friday and Saturday, which is the right wind that I need to go hunt a funnel over in Illinois. And this is a Bobby Worthington inspired funnel to the max. I listened to a bunch of his podcasts, whenever he starts talking about, really, really tight funnels, a bunch of trails going through there. I tried also putting a scrape in there. That was, inspired by Troy Pottinger. That's something I've also been getting into this year also, but, the scrape didn't do too well because it's just not set up for that kind of a thing, or maybe it's just a phase here in the last couple weeks. But I am excited to go hunt this funnel. So that's gonna be Friday or Saturday that I'm sitting in there all day, and if a deer comes through there, it's gonna be about 20 yards or less. So I should have a really good shot.
Nice.
So that's what awesome, I have to look forward to here in the next week or so.
Nice. But, and then anything? What's up for Missouri the rest of the year?
So for Missouri the rest of the year, I still have one tag, and I can talk about it a little bit if you want me to. But I really, really tried to have that tag filled already, but that has also not gone well. We're still in. We're still in our rut phases. So I'm going to be looking to capitalize, something here, hopefully after Illinois, I can go back to Missouri and try to find something while our rut's still going on. If not, I'll be looking forward to late season hunting here in Missouri, which is, going to be trying to find, deer coming
back to areas that they were in, previously, before rifle season. Finding deer coming back to food. It's an awesome time of year. I'm definitely looking forward to that for sure.
Right. Yeah. I always look, I mean, I like late season. Like I have a love-hate relationship with late season. Because usually this is one of the few years that like I'm not still holding at least one tag, that's burning a hole in my pocket. Right. And then, and I don't have great food sources around me necessarily to kind of play the late season food source game. But that's the part that I hate about it.
Right.
What I love about it is that everyone's pretty much out of the woods for the most part, at least around here. Right. It's like it gets back to like people are done. They hunted the Super Bowl during the rut and the pre-rut, and then anyone who was hunting gun season came out like the first 3 days, and then it kind of quiets down, right? And then when you get into late season, it's like, it's almost a ghost town. And so I love it for that reason, but I've just never been able to figure out any of the parcels around here for a late season just because there's not like a destination food source that I can say, like, I know they're going to try to go here, right? And so it just becomes a little bit of a harder game. So this year will probably just be starting like early scouting during late season is probably what I'm going to start doing.
Yeah. There's I've also started using trail cameras this year, which has been really, really fun. There was one trail camera that I'm kind of going to base my late season hunting around, which might be a dumb idea, but basically there's a lot of red oaks in this one area. And I was learning that apparently some of the, I guess, deer, they wait on some of these red oaks for them to freeze a couple times because it makes the tannin content lower in acorns, so it's like less bitter. I thought that was really interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh damn!
And
I didn't know that. Where'd you pick that up at?
Actually, my brother, because I was asking him about it because I think tannin is poisonous to cows. And so he actually knows quite a bit about that, which was really interesting. But it makes sense because there was a lot of red acorns in this area, and we had a ton of deer in there late season. We're like, they got to be eating those acorns, So I think that's interesting. So that'll be something that I kind of explore in the late season. Also, I'm pretty excited about that.
Awesome, man. Well, I hope that funnel, that Bobby Worthington pinch that you're going to sit in, I hope it works out for you. I hope you kill a magnum in there and feel good about your shot. That way you just end on a high note with that. That's what I'm crossing my fingers for. And then I hope you come back and you get a slammer there in late season in Missouri, man. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, I might be out in your neck of the woods, next year. Maybe we'll get to party together. How about that?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Awesome, man. Hey, I've held you here for a little over an hour, brother. I want to be sensitive to your time because I know you're with family and we got the holiday and stuff like that. So I want to make sure you get some time with them. Before I let you go, though, let people know where they can follow you and anything you got going on that you want to make them hip to.
Sure. So my name's Jace Allen. You can find me on Facebook. Also have an Instagram with my lovely Instagram handle that I mentioned earlier, Nature of the Beast. I got a couple YouTube episodes out there on the Whitetail Addictions YouTube channel. My Kentucky buck from last year, and then the season before, I shot three archery bucks that were roughly around 140. Both, I think they're decent episodes. Go give them a watch.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, brother, I appreciate you coming on, and happy Thanksgiving to you, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you would do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.